Welcome to Shambhu Sessions, where we explore the heart, spirit, and stories behind the music. I'm Shambhu, guitarist and composer, and today I'm happy to welcome Jeff Oster, a dear friend and someone whose sound has been woven into my own musical life since 2009. Jeff is a remarkable flugelhorn player with a long history in contemporary jazz and new age music. He's a Grammy nominee, and we've recorded and performed together on numerous occasions. Jeff's musical style has been described as Miles Davis meets Pink Floyd or Miles meets Enya, combining his flugelhorn artistry with ethereal soundscapes and appealing to fans of both jazz fusion and atmospheric music. Jeff's sound has helped to define modern new age instrumental music through his collaborations with Will Ackerman, Nile Rodgers, Steely Dan's Bernard Purdie and Chuck Rainey, Tom Eaton, and countless artists produced by Will, including me. There are literally dozens of albums that feature Jeff's artistic contributions. Jeff and I met in 2009 through a mutual friend, world flutist Ann Lakater. I was looking to record a CD of my own music, and Jeff had been recording with Will Ackerman. We met and started jamming together. Jeff then introduced me to Will, and that led to the recording of my first two albums, Sacred Love and Dreaming of Now, with Will producing and Jeff adding his flugelhorn mastery to several songs. Jeff and I also collaborated on two songs, On Mother's Day, a beautiful track that appears on Jeff's album Next, and Montauk to Mexico appearing on my album Reflections. Jeff is one of the most explorative artists I know. He is constantly expanding the stylistic envelope. Today we will explore Jeff's musical path, his unique sound, and where his music is headed. I'm happy to welcome the one and only Jeff Oster.
So great to be here, Shambhu. Nice to see you.
How are you and where are you?
If you can see behind me, you'll know how I am. So I'm great. I'm here in Mexico, a little bit north of Puerto Vallarta. It's my happy place. I'm down here for 6 months from November until May, and it's beautiful and it feels beautiful. And because of that, I feel beautiful.
I love it. And it comes through your music. So let's go back to when we met in 2009. I was kind of a high-flying tech PR guy based in San Francisco, and I was looking to transition out of PR and back into music. We met on a ferry boat that ran from the Embarcadero to Alameda, thanks to Ann Lakater. And then we started jamming, and we went to Maui together. And then I brought Todd Boston into the mix as well. What's your recollection of those early days?
Well, the Oakland to Alameda ferry had a end of the month party. It's like a happy hour where musicians would get on and play, and we go back and forth from like 5:30 until 8:30. And the ferry, the management thought it was okay, and everybody brought wine and cheese, and there was music. I think that was the first time we played together, would be on that boat, you and me and Ann. So
it was 2009.
That late?
Yeah.
Wow. I started writing the ferry in like the late 90s during the .com thing. So it was great. And then, when you brought Todd Boston over to the house I was living in at the time, and we had a little jam there, and it's just expanded and continued. Both of you are two of my closest friends, and the music continues too. So it's great, man. And I love it down here. I've been coming here since 2003. There's a music festival at the end of February, and I would come down for years for only maybe 5 days, 10 days or something like that during the festival time at the end of February. And now it's extended to 6 months,
Right on.
Why not?
So, exactly. So let's go back to your roots. You studied classical and jazz in high school?
I started playing when I was 8 years old, and I took lessons.
Trumpet or flugelhorn?
Trumpet, only trumpet. I took lessons in public school, basically. I started playing the trumpet in Highland Park, Illinois. And I never forgot the day, I even see it now, where they walked me into the band room when I was in 3rd grade, 8 years old. And there were all these instruments, and they basically said, pick one. And I looked at them all, and I saw this brass trumpet on a purple velour case. So that's pretty. And my parents told me that I came home and told them that I wanted to play the melody. That's when I started to play. And so I took lessons all through public school, and then we moved to Rhode Island, and then we moved to Framingham, Massachusetts. By then I was 12, and my parents had decided that I was still into playing enough to where they got me private lessons. So it was all sort of classical, tiny bit of jazz. But then I started to play in a little community band up in Massachusetts, and then we moved to Florida, to Miami, Coral Gables. Down in the South, marching bands are a really big deal. as are the concert bands that are sort of spun off in the wintertime when they're not marching, you know. So it turned into this really great relationship with not only my junior high teacher, but especially my high school band director, a guy known as Uncle Willie, William Ledoux. And this was like one of the top bands in Florida for years and years and years. And every year he would take 200 people, like 100 marching band members and 100 cavalets and spinners and all the cheerleaders and stuff overseas. So we took this trip when I was a sophomore in high school to England, France, Holland, Belgium, and Germany, like all of us, and played a concert under the Eiffel Tower and all this crazy stuff. And it was completely inspiring. He gave me my first paid gig. He paid me $10 to play taps behind a tree for a veteran's funeral in Miami. And I sort of kept going from there. And, you
I
know,
love
and
it.
that was the start of it all, really.
And what were you listening to growing up? What kind of music?
In my youngest years, it was Herb Alpert, but it was also like Michael Jackson. I was completely a top 40 guy. You know, it was like na 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 na, hey hey, goodbye from the band Steam, and I Want You Back, and that kind of stuff, you know. But then I've heard, you know, the Herb Alpert Whipped Cream album, and that sort of really got me going with the trumpet, in terms of at least seeing and hearing somebody that was that way. Very pop, way more pop than jazz.
You ended up getting into a whole bunch of pop cover bands. Tell me about that phase.
In Miami, this was at the time when Blood, Sweat, and Tears in Chicago were big. I was in a three-piece power trio where we would play at a mob-owned bar in North Miami Beach from 9 at night till 5 in the morning. It was a guitar, bass, drums, and trumpet. And I learned how to play percussion and stuff because you can't play trumpet on every song, you know. So I did that whole vibe. But we would play stuff like Sweet Caroline, and I played a little little horn line and stuff. But then I also joined maybe a 9-piece band, and we were doing, you know, Chicago, Call on Me and Beginnings and their great horn songs. That was in Miami. And then I moved to Eugene, Oregon. And then everything sort of took off from there, where I started to meet some people in LA. And in 1979, I moved to LA. And that whole thing was, I wanted to do original music, but I had to make a living. So I did Vegas and Atlantic City and Lake Tahoe lounge bands, where I was in a horn section there. And then a bunch of top 40 stuff in LA. All around.
Wow. And at a certain point in time, you decided that was not going to be a career.
After 10 years of making $10,000 a year in LA, from 1979 to 1987. And I wanted to do original music because we were working pretty steadily doing top 40 cover band stuff. But the whole band, which was a really good band, they were very happy making $300 a week. And I'm like, there's no way in the world that I'm going to survive doing that, you know? And I wanted to do original music. But the only way to do original music, especially in LA, is that you have to either pay to play, go to a club and pay, and you have to pay your musicians to do original music because they're not getting paid. So nobody in the band wanted to do that. Just in the band, there has to be a better way than this. And the real defining point for me was, I guess I could say this, you could edit it out if you want, but it got to the point where it was Tuesday night. There were 5 people in the club. And to save money, I would order a cranberry juice from the bar, and I would go behind the kick drum with my bottle of vodka and pour my drink behind the kick drum. And I remember looking at myself thinking, this is not going to end well. I don't want to be 60 years old playing Proud Mary to 5 people on Tuesday night for no money. It has to be a better way. So when I was a limo driver for a long time, because I could come and go, and I would always bring my trumpet in the car and play in the back, and Dudley Moore would come walking up, and I'd made sure I was still in the back playing so he'd see me. And one day he was conducting me from outside the car window because I wanted him to hear that I could play. One of my driver buddies became a stockbroker, and he goes, you know, you're really good on the phone. I was selling his office supplies. He goes, you'd be a good broker. I said, dude, I never even took a finance class ever, and I didn't even graduate college. So he comes over one day, 1987, and big stack of study materials for the stockbroker exam, and dumped it on my bed. And in April of 87, I became a stockbroker, and an annuity and insurance salesperson. And I said, okay, I'm going to save money to hire the musicians I want to hire to do original music. And it took me from 1987 until 2003. to make that happen. But I did.
Wow.
But I
So
did.
then we're getting close to your first album release,
Yeah.
2005.
Yeah.
Um, you connected up with Will Ackerman to record that album. And as it turned out, you had bought a cabin in Vermont.
1993.
Yeah.
My oldest friend, we've known each other for like 55 years or something like that now. He lives in southern Vermont. I would go visit him. And I was living in LA at the time, and I've always wanted like a cabin in the woods. And we went looking around at stuff, and there was one for not much money. So I bought it in 1993. And it was my fall, go there for September, October, watch the leaves change and hang out with my friend and stuff like that for years. And then when I met Will, which came from a cold emailing that I sent from my desk wearing my suit in San Francisco at the day job that I had at the time. It turned out that Will lives 45 minutes south of my cabin in Vermont.
Now, Will's music is a far cry from pop. How did you kind of get into the listening aesthetic to hear Will Ackerman and say, this is the guy I want to work with?
When I lived in Eugene, Oregon, in 1977, 1978, 1979, I met a few guitar players up there, and one of them turned me on to It Takes a Year and Search of the Turtles Navel, the first couple of albums that Will did.
Will's first album.
And I fell in love with his music.
Mm.
So for years, from the late 70s, all through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and even now, I would sit in my house and play my horn to Will Ackerman records.
Wow.
By myself. And at that same time in 1978, Chuck Mangione had come out with Feel So Good. And I said, what is that horn that he's holding on to? And if you look at the Feel So Good cover, he's holding his horn around his chest.
Yeah.
So I found out the make of it, and I ordered it, not played. I just had it shipped to my place in Oregon, and it's the same horn I play, that same one. It's when I started playing the Flugelhorn, was in the late 70s.
Wow. So you're working with Will. He brings together the cream of the crop of studio musicians that he works with. You know, from the very first song, Fool's Gold, I thought you succeeded in establishing your trademark sound. You like hit it on the nail. That album won a ZMR award for Album of the Year. I'd say a really strong start. And there are several songs featuring Will on guitar. Tell me what it was like for you to get in the studio with Will and work on that album.
Well, there was an EP that came out before released, which had Fool's Gold on it. The piano was played by Philip Auber, another Windham Hill.
Great artist.
And he sent me the piano track. And I was sitting in my cabin and I worked up a horn part and went down to Will's and did that. But the whole thing about working with Will was I always had this dream, literally for 20 years, of making music with this guy. Never thought he would produce me, but I always wanted to make a song with him, actually, me and him on a song. I did the EP At Last in 2004. I brought 3 songs, and the 4th song was a song called At Last. It was like freaking me out. I went pretty quickly from fanboy to, I don't want to say peer, but working coworkers, you know? And then I got the guts to say, hey, man, you know, I've always wanted to do a song with you. Always, my whole life, since I heard you in the late 70s. He goes, okay. And then typical Will, he doesn't bring it up. So it's the last day of the session or something like that at the time that I had there. And I said, think we could do a song? It was so scary to even say that, you know. So he takes his parlor guitar that Michael Hedges had left for him, a parlor guitar, and he sits on the steps in his studio and just starts noodling. And I'm standing there next to Will, and he's playing these little parts. Will tends to just wander through stuff till he finds something that's great. And I'm like producing him, saying, yeah, that, keep that. So we got enough stuff where we went out into the studio and started to record it. And he recorded it. And the thing about Will is that if he records something, he doesn't sit around to wait for his music to be turned into a song. He actually went out of town that weekend. And me and Corin Nelson carved together this 45 minutes of Will playing different stuff into the song. And then I went into the studio when Will was there and just sat on the floor, basically, noodled out the horn part for Fool's Gold and stood up and played it. Actually, the first song was called At Last. And going home that night that I did with him, I was crying. I'm just tears, going back to my cabin, listening to this Jeff Oster, Will Ackerman song. I call it my dream come true series of songs with Will, because I have several, like that with him that
You
he and I
do.
wrote together. It's great. It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that album had a great reception. A couple of years later, you did True
yeah.
and expanded your sound into this galactic realm with a
Right.
song, Saturn Calling. I
Yeah.
remember hearing that when I met you, thinking, wow, this guy should be playing planetarium shows. Tell
And we
me,
did.
I know you did. Tell me about True.
By then, I had been doing the stockbroker thing for a period of time, or the financial planning thing. So it wasn't just stocks. And I had money, which was my whole goal all along was, okay, I'm going to have enough money to be able to hire people that I'd like to make music with. I wanted to sort of expand, and most of my work in writing the songs was always done, and still is actually, on GarageBand. I sit in my house and I come up with a track, and I find tracks online from different places, and I build a bass that I then play off of. Saturn Calling came from, I've always been a big fan of NASA and all that stuff. And I heard this clip of the recording of the auroras of Saturn, which sounds like wind. So it's public domain because it's government stuff. And I put it on the song, and I came up with the heroic melody for it and all that stuff. And at that time, I was spending time working in New York City. And I had met this drummer named Keith Carlock.
Yeah.
Keith, who's gone on to be Steely Dan's main drummer. But Keith and I jammed at the Bitter End. There was a Sunday night jam at the Bitter End in Greenwich Village. I think that's where it is. He was playing the drums, and I got his number. He told me he had just done Two Against Nature. It hadn't come out yet. I invited him to come up to Vermont, and we played it. We played those sessions with him in a barn.
Wow.
And it was with him, and on bass was T-Bone Wolk, the bass player that used to play for years. He's passed away now, but he used
With
to
Will.
with Will, and also with Hall and Oates. He was Hall and Oates' bass player for years and years and years. And he was Will's one of his go-to bass players. So Keith Carlock and T-Bone Wolk live in the studio playing on these tracks is just off the hook. It's great.
And you've got songs like Serengeti and Mumbai, they have this really tasty rhythmic footprint that kind of
Exactly.
complemented this ambient direction you had going.
Because I added, Keith Carlock was a great drummer, and then Samate. These are all people that were in Will's world at the time. He had produced some Samate stuff, and Samate came in and sang. That's where Serengeti came from, and From the Dream Time, a little bit of singing on there. So there was some vocal that got it added, but not really word vocals, more like wordless vocals mixed in.
And
Yeah,
then you had another fantastic collaboration, On One Knee.
yeah, with Will. Exactly.
Unbelievable, which really
Unbelievable.
captures the feeling of your friendship. Tell me about
So
that song.
Will did the guitar part, and actually the horn part, it was basically one take. I mean, from beginning to end. And I remember when I got done doing it, I think Corin was still the engineer. And I said, I want to do it again. He goes, no, no. And the horn, that was a great performance. So we left it on there. And so the titles always come afterwards for me. I don't do the title and then the music, but it made me think of proposing to somebody. The On One Knee, sort of like a plaintive yet loving offering. That's what that song meant to me, and that's indeed what it was and
Uh,
is.
Yeah. And then 4 years later, the album Surrender, you've got collaboration with Diane Arkenstone on vocals that
Mhm.
really has the ambient rhythmic Jeff Oster again. Um,
But all computer, except for Diane and me. There were no acoustic instruments on that album.
Amazing.
Brian Kerrigan programmed all the various synth parts, and they programmed the drum parts and stuff like that. And then Diane came and sang on a couple of the songs, and we did the horn parts. And it was my sort of, I don't want to say techno. I've always had this sort of dance music love as well. That was like my electronic album in a way. But
Yeah. With all these albums, you try out different directions.
Mhm.
4 years later, you got the album Next. You've got Nile Rodgers on the title cut. You've got
Right,
performances by Steely Dan legends Bernard Purdie and Chuck Rainey,
right.
and a song we collaborated on called On Mother's Day. Tell me what it was like working with Bernard and Chuck and Nile.
With Bernard and Chuck, we did a session down in New Jersey at Steve Jankowski's studio down in Wall, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore. Bernard was from Jersey. I asked Bernard if he would play on some of my songs, and I sent him some, and he said yes. And then once Bernard said yes, I asked Chuck, figuring that they know each other for all the Steely Dan stuff they did. And Chuck said yes. Chuck flew up to Jersey, and they both showed up in Bernard's big blue Cadillac at the studio, and we did like 6 songs with them. Tom Eaton and I drove down to the studio, and we recorded them with Jankowski doing the engineering at the studio, and Tom as well. It sort of produced their various tracks with them, brought that back up to Will's studio, and then Steve Jankowski is the trumpet player for Nile Rodgers. And then as we went along, there was one of the songs where I said, well, let's just see if Nile will do it. So I asked Steve Jankowski, can he ask Nile? And Niall said, yeah, he would. So I sent him the track. And one day I'm at the airport, I get this call from Niall on the phone. We sent it to his studio in Connecticut where Niall lives. And they recorded his guitar parts, and we mixed in his guitar to that song, And it's great. So it was this combination. That one obviously has more of a rhythm section vibe in it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you go in another direction, like a smooth jazz collaboration with Ruslan Sirota and a whole new cast of studio players. And you record the song Troppo e Baffo, which I absolutely love. Tell me what you were going for with Reach.
I got involved in sort of trying to share my music in the Grammy world. Ruslan I had met through some of my connections there. Ruslan's an amazing jazz piano player and an amazing producer. He started sending me tracks that I would be able to conceivably play along with, and we would turn into an album. He sent me 6 or 7 tracks that he had made, basic computer and piano stuff. And I was kind of feeling it, but then we were going back and forth, and he goes, listen, I know these great studio players in LA. You should come down here, and I'll get them all in the studio. We'll make an album. And so what I did was I found a whole bunch of songs out there in the world, EDM, like dance music songs and chill songs and all these different vibes from playlists, just other people's music. And I put together this playlist of the kind of feel that I wanted. Russell and I agreed on 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 of them, kind of a thing, right? Of those songs. So we show up into the studio with no written music at all, nothing, not one note written. But these 5 musicians in the studio, Ruslan playing piano in the control room. We play one of these songs that I liked, whatever it was, some chill song. Basically, Ruslan said, okay, let's try to get this feel. So the musicians go out. There's a drummer, a percussionist, a bass player, and Ruslan, and a guitarist. And they just started jamming, and we recorded the whole thing. Ruslan's playing in the control room, talking to them through the headphones, saying, okay, now just guitar and me. There's just guitar and piano. Okay, now bring in the bass. And the bass would come in. The whole album is a jam, basically. Nothing written. Every song, not one note was written. Ruslan then took that for 3 months. Him and Jan Perchuk, his editor and mixing guy, carved it into tracks that had song forms to them, basically, the ones that you hear on the album. Then I came down for 3 days, and he played one of the songs. It was now just blow. So I just played and just played and just played and just played over every one of those songs, multiple tracks, different things. He goes, now go really high here. Now, here's a melody line that you play this harmony. And I'd play the harmony. And he went away for another 3 months and had edited together. I never heard any of it as it was going on, edited all together into the album, basically.
Amazing.
Not one written note. It was wild.
So this idea of improvising an album continued. You did Brothers in 2021, where you improvised with Tom Eaton and Will Ackerman.
Correct. And that improv was a little bit like what happened with Reach. Okay, let's find songs that Will has played on or has written and released. Jeff, give me 5 songs that you like, Tom Eaton would say to me. So we would go and listen to those songs, and the same thing, but Tom would have his piano sounding like a guitar. And he would make up stuff that was kind of in that vibe of whatever the song was we were listening to. And then I would go into the studio there and make up horn parts to those parts that Tom had done. And we got, I think, 6 songs together for that way at Tom's studio in Newburyport, Massachusetts, I think is where. Yeah. Right. And then we took them up to Will's studio. Will came in, hadn't heard any of those 6 songs. And he played like he does over them. And we made them in such a way that it would feel like a Will vibe. So Will sat right into it and played and played and played. Will brought 2 of his own songs in with just guitar that we then took back. I added a horn parts there, and Tom added some stuff back at the studio. And then Tom mixed it all into Brothers.
That was a Grammy-nominated album, right?
Indeed. It sure was.
Congratulations on that.
It was wonderful to see that happen. It was great.
Yeah. And then COVID happened and you started hunkering down in the studio and you created a lo-fi album called Howlin' Loon.
Howling Loon. I was in Canada. My partner lived in Winnipeg. And it was wintertime. So loons, you hear them in Canada. And I was in her living room. And I ended up spending the winter there. And I don't know if you know about Winnipeg, but it gets super cold there, like 40 below centigrade there. You don't go out. So I was just in the living room. And the lo-fi idea came from my distributor, a guy named Rod Linham, who runs Dashco Music, who distributes a lot of my music into Spotify and all that stuff. And Rod loves lo-fi. He's got lo-fi playlists and all this different stuff. And he asked me if I ever heard of lo-fi before. I said, no. So he started sending me these songs and he goes, I think you could do something like that. So I listened to it and I'm like, yeah. So I got a bunch of lo-fi loops, lo-fi drum loops, lo-fi bass loops. I would go to Wiki Loops, or I would go to Looperman, where you get these free 8-bar patterns that people have done. You could search by genre. So I started cobbling together all of these different parts. And I started to paste them together, much like I did my older New Age stuff. Because it's lo-fi, which is low fidelity, I actually just played the horn in the living room to my Shure SM57 Beta, not cheap, but not expensive mic. And I would just play into it and did the horn parts there in the living room. And then I sent all of that to Todd Boston, who then mastered it basically and did some Atmos mixes of it and that kind of stuff. But it was all lo-fi, homegrown stuff. It was wild. And my daughter did the album cover. She had graduated Smith College and did the album cover for Howling Loon.
Yeah. Amazing. And it's really kind of interesting because you start with Will Ackerman, who's all about this authentic music, acoustic artists and all that kind of stuff. And you're kind of doing that, but you're sort of melding it into all kinds of contemporary forms.
Well, in the very, very beginning, when I released, Will had called up DJ Thornton, who was running a radio show called The Morning Breeze down in Southern California. And she told me that when Will called her up and said, listen, I have this new age flugelhorn player for you to listen to. She goes, no way. Just no way. What other trumpet players are in new age? Mark Isham, maybe, when he was doing that mostly, there's not that many others. So it was different. I'm bringing all of my stuff anyway, my Steely Dan and all the different musical worlds that I've loved. And I've been a huge Pink Floyd fan for years. And Yes, and all that prog rock stuff. So I can't keep away from it. So I always bring that in. It's not just hawks screaming in the background with tom-tom. It's different than that, which not that there's anything wrong with hawks screaming in the background and tom-toms. They have their place in new age music as well. I don't want to be elitist in any way.
Yeah. And then in 2024, you jumped back into an improv with Tom and Vin Downs for 7 conversations.
Crazy. That's pure improv. That was, I want to say, 3 hours of me and Tom and Vin on electric guitar, basically doing these new age jams at Tom's studio. And jams meaning Tom would start with a chord pattern of some kind and we would just fill in. And it was hours and hours of it that Tom whittled down into the songs that made it onto 7 Conversations, which are 7 different improvs that we called 7 Conversations. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
And
love that.
Vin's amazing. Tom's amazing. Those 2 guys, was perfect because they're funny too. Yes, they're humorous people in terms of their real life. There's a lot of laughter mixed in with all the chill stuff. It's great.
I remember talking to Vin about it, saying he's more of a classically trained guy, and it was hard for
Oh,
him to just let go to the
I know.
moment as you lived in an improv world, and
Yeah.
he did it. And I'm a big fan of Vin as well. And then your
Great.
most recent album,
Yeah.
Divine Ratio of Love with Renee Wilson. Tell me about that collaboration. You were producing that?
She and I produced it, and Todd Boston. Renee, I met down here in Mexico. And one of the things I do down here is I have a fair amount of time where I go out and play solo. And either I sit in with people or I have this play along with tracks, chill tracks, and a solo act that I go and play at these different restaurants and stuff. So one night I was playing and Renee was in the audience with a mutual friend of ours. And her friend said, she's a great singer. You should have her come up and sing with you. So she came up, sang Summertime, and we made this connection. That was maybe 2 years ago, maybe more, maybe even 3. And as time went on, the same mutual friend said, you guys should make an album together. And then we found a way where she would come to, I played the music festival here in February. So the last, I think it's 3 times now, 3 years, Renee has come up and sang a couple songs. We did a version of Rolling Stones' Miss You, sort of this down-tempo version of it that led to an album of cover songs, Divine Ratio of Love. We recorded 11 of them with my San Francisco band, with Celso Alberti and Todd Boston and Michael Manring and Frank Martin, and a cellist, Josh McLean from up in Portland, friend of Todd's and mine. That was the session band. And we recorded it in Oakland, 25th Street Studios.
Yeah.
And then a guy who was produced by Will, the band Night Noise, a violinist named Billy Oskay, who has a studio outside of Portland, where Renee and I went up and re-recorded our vocal and trumpet parts there with Todd. And Todd mixed it and mastered it. We released the 5 songs in August of this year. And then we have another 6 to come that hopefully we'll get through in the next year and release them next summer as a full album.
Love that.
Cool.
And let's jump into how you perform solo or even on stage. You use loopers, you play with echoes and reverbs. Tell me a little bit about your rig and how you manage the Jeff Oster sound live.
Well, there's a tiny bit of musical controversy with other musicians around me adding all this stuff to the horn. I've been around some pretty straight ahead jazz musicians that are like, why do you put all that stuff on your horn? But I love it. That's what I tell them. It's because I love it. It's fun. It keeps me interested. I know how to play My Funny Valentine, and I know how to play Besame Mucho, and I know how to play Misty and Summertime. I could do all those just playing or a little reverb. But my whole prog rock, Pink Floydy, Yes, The Orb, space world stuff, I, for the longest time, have brought into the live arena. And right now I use an Eventide H9 foot pedal, which is controlled by my iPad. That has like 99 algorithms on it. And all of those can be different kinds of reverb and delay and fifths, like harmonized stuff. So I sit there and play a live. I build a playlist of instrumentals that I really like. Other people's stuff, sometimes my stuff, sometimes tracks without anything over it. Some of the tracks from 7 Conversations, some of Tom Eaton's noodling sort of peaceful stuff. And I'll have it all on an Apple playlist, which I use in my phone that I Bluetooth into a Bose speaker. And I plug my pedal my horn. I have a wireless mic that goes through the system, the Eventide system into the PA. So I jam with those tracks basically. And as I'm playing along, the way the Eventide system is set up, there's all these little squares where I could play like something that's got harmonizer and then hit the delay and then hit a wah pedal. And so I do like almost like a live acoustics mix as I play. And I'll play for 3 hours like that, just improvising over these playlist of tracks that I have. That's my live show here. It's how I'm able to do it for me and not feel like I'm just sitting on the corner with a trumpet for 3 hours. I actually keep myself interested, and there's a different vibe. You know, I can make a playlist of starting whale sounds and all this chill stuff, and then go into something with a beat, and I could build a night of vibe that sort of runs through the evening. And that's what I do. This is my life.
Like me, you really seem to find your own personal calm in music. Like wherever you find yourself, you pull out the horn, you're playing in cafes. Is music your happy place?
To get even deeper psychologically, when I grew up, starting playing the trumpet when I was 8 years old, we never lived longer than 4 years in any city until I was 18 years old or 19 years old when I left Miami. I would go to these different cities, and as a new kid in town, especially in junior high, elementary school, high school, you're always, if you're new, you're not in the clique, right? So I was always very aware of who did I need to be today to get these kids to like me. Did I need to be funny Jeff? Did I need to be serious Jeff? Did I need to be smart Jeff that had the answers to the chemistry exam or whatever like that? So my words would be different based on the outer situation that I felt like I needed to fit into. But my horn playing, first of all, when I pick up a horn, I can't say a word because it's on my lips. So there's no actual words coming out of my mouth. So the only thing that comes out really is my heart, the wordless core of me. My partner and I have talked about this a bit too. There's also an element of, you know how monks chant?
Mm.
And there's that long vibe of Om Mani. Well, a trumpet is nothing other than an amplifying device of the vibration of my lips being amplified by the brass of the horn.
Mm.
So it's at least with a saxophone, you blow into the sax, the reed is what's vibrating. But with a trumpet or any brass instrument, the vibration is me. So that expression is one of a deep core, a deep heart that's wordless. And yet, for the different people that hear it, they find inspiration, heartfelt inspiration from it. And backing that into the kind of trumpet player that I am, because there are many trumpet players that play high notes, like Maynard Ferguson, and there's Dizzy and these guys that play really fast jazz. My thing has always been tone. It's always been, I can make a horn sound pretty. That's just extended itself into delays and reverbs and echoes and that kind of stuff. And the big round sound of mostly the flugelhorn that I play and share.
Yeah, I think it's your heart that is the compelling aspect in your music and why people love you and why you have such a large fan base and all that. So how do you stay inspired to keep creating?
Well, the live thing is always in the moment. My live show is always pick up the horn. And even though it's the same songs, it's never the same notes. It keeps me interested. The live gig is like a surprise. What do I play now? I'm not even thinking about what I'm going to play. I just start and it goes where it goes. I love it. That's completely inspiring for me in the moment live. And in terms of recording, releasing an album is writing it, which can take a year, recording it, which can take a year, releasing it, which can take a year. For me, I don't do one a month. I spend a fair amount of time marketing, such as it is. Kind of hate even saying that, but it's true. And it's a whole other creative fun thing for me. I make videos and things like that around the songs. That's a whole other version of creativity, which I quite enjoy, and it's a part of the whole musical process for me. But once that cycle goes through, however long it takes, there's a hole of some kind until something comes up, whether it's a certain vibe of songs that I've been listening to that I really, really like, or a suggestion from my distributor that says, have you ever tried lo-fi? That kind of a thing. Or you've always wanted to do cover songs, and then Renee shows up and we do all these different cover songs. For the longest time, I've thought of and resisted the idea of doing standards, like a standards album. And I still can't bring myself to do it, although I know I could find a great string section and do that. But it has to pull out of me in some way. The music has to come from a feeling of some kind, And it's probably time for me to do another, I hate to call it new age album, but some version of sound. Like this one thing I was thinking of doing there, I play pickleball now. This is how I sort of stay in shape, And there's a court here in Mexico that is an old warehouse, but it's all drywall. And the delay in the room is unbelievable. I've already gone in there once or twice and played my horn, but I've thought of going in there and playing the chromatic scale, like play a C and just stretch it out and just let it sit there, and then play C sharp and play it and let it delay into nothing and play every note in the chromatic scale. And then in some way take all those long held out notes and say, now I'm going to take these four and play them next to each other. And I'm going to duck out these three and put in these two and make these like almost like a chant album of some kind, of just these sound, something like that. That's sort of been floating in my head, being down here and knowing that that place exists. That might be coming, something like that. And then maybe another lo-fi. It's easy enough for me to go down here to my little studio in the bunk bed room and shut the doors and make sure the ocean can't be heard too much, or make the ocean heard and make it a part of the soundtrack and play.
The ocean disappeared behind you as the sun
Yeah.
set happened.
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, those sound like exciting projects. So you're still kind of figure out what's next. You have a lot of options.
Yeah. There's 6 more songs with Renee's album. That's not done yet. But Tom Eaton and I went in and recorded 6 new songs for a new Brothers album, whatever we'll call it. But that probably won't come out for a couple of years. That's sitting there. Where we'll go over to Will's. Maybe I go to Vermont for the fall. So I'll go there. I'll go there this coming fall, and maybe we'll take it over to Will and add some of his guitar to it, and maybe start working on another Brothers album.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So is there anything I've missed in your story?
No, you're pretty good, man. You're covering the waterfront.
We covered the waterfront.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I've done a fair amount of collaborations with you, but many other musicians because of Will. For the longest time, and maybe to some degree even still, am the house flugelhorn player for Imaginary Road Studios with Will and Tom Eaton. So I get asked to play on albums from Masako. I just did a couple tracks for Randy Meeks has an album coming out. I just did a couple songs for him that's going to be coming out in the future. Some of Tom's stuff. Will has a new album coming out next year that I played on. I added it up. There's like 60 different songs that I've played on, different people's songs.
Incredible.
My Corey Carruthers and Heidi Breyer and Fiona Joy Hawkins, go down the list. These are all from Will, mostly getting invited to play horn on 1 or 2 of their songs, kind of a thing. It's great. It's in you and I meeting, not really through Will, but it's extended into that. And that on Mother's Day track we did together was on Mother's Day, and we actually recorded it then. And my
beautiful
mom,
track. It's a beautiful
my
track.
mom passed away 2 months later. It's beautiful. Beautiful track. Yeah. The idea of meeting Will has also led into an entire new age sideman thing, which has been kind of cool and very rewarding. New music all the time,
Yeah, well, like I say, your sound is all over Sirius XM,
Yeah.
even most recently on the Masako song, which
Yeah.
is riding
One
high
by
in the
one.
charts. Jeff Oster, it's been fun getting to hear your story. I want to
Yeah,
thank you for spending time with me today and bringing your heart and story to the conversation. You
of course.
remind us that it's never too late to follow the sound that calls you.
Never. No, I started at age 50. I
That's
mean,
right.
some of the first liner notes that Will Ackerman wrote, it was Jeff Oster is a financial planner guy. And by this time in his life should be sitting at a country club saying woulda, coulda, shoulda. He also plays the horn and he's just started this whole recording career. It took me a long time, but man, it's been so worth it. And now it's sort of the dream come true is that I'm retired. So all I do is hang out near the beach and play music. It's great. I love it. And some pickleball. It's great.
Well, folks can learn more about you and your music at jeffoster.com. I'll include a link in the episode description. And if this episode resonated with you, please like, follow, and share Shambhu Sessions wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Shambhu, and until the next time, stay open, stay inspired, and keep listening.